In the first act of our Women in Tech series, we have seen that the inventors and drivers of the first actual written program, the compiler which enabled developers to use natural language for programming, the technology behind Bluetooth, GPS and Wi-Fi were, well, actually women. This second act will focus on the modern advent of computing, female entrepreneurship and the creation of our internet. Let's discover the untold stories of women in tech. At the end of the war, women worked at the Army's top secret projects, the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, or ENIAC, the commonly acknowledged world's first computing device. Even then, the women didn't get any recognition for this. Until this point, there's a pretty obvious trend of exceptional women contributing to the key moments of tech and being more or less ignored or discredited for it, at least in the beginnings. Back in the days, throughout the 50s and 60s, women were the software engineers, while men would be the hardware engineers and getting all the attention and the fame. Little did they know that in today's tech scene, this has almost completely shifted with respect to the roles to celebrate and which ones to forget about. I don't say it's righteous, but it is what it is. Today's rockstars are software developers, the blacksmiths of customer-facing features, while the hardware engineers are often overlooked in the final product. With grace and several more instances paving the path. In the 1960s, programming was a common role for women aside of the classical roles of teachers, nurses and social workers. But that doesn't mean that they were recognized for their accomplishments. Sexism was all over the place and put a glass ceiling over the women in tech that could not be passed. One day, Shirley decided that it was enough.
Hit the glass ceiling. No matter what I tried to do there, I was getting blocked.
In 1962, Shirley set up a women-only software startup called the Freelance Programmers. The workers, being women, often forced to stay at home with their children, were not paid by the hour, but by the tasks they accomplished, allowing them to work from home. This concept was far ahead of its time and more relevant than ever before, even in our modern days. The company, however, struggled in the beginning. Clients didn't want to give their work into the hands of women.
We decided to write the same letters to the same people, but signing them Steve Shirley. And surprise, surprise, we began to get a few replies.
After that, the business took off. Steve Shirley made another bold move that was not common at the time by sharing the company with her employees, all of which would later become millionaires with the success. The Freelance Programmers took industry-challenging contracts like developing software standards that would be later used by the NATO and programming the flight recorder for the supersonic Concorde. Shirley funded most of her fortune for charity and also founded the Oxford Internet Institute. Brilliant women like Ada, Grace and Hedy achieved massive accomplishments but didn't get any recognition during their lifetime. Shirley was the first woman entrepreneur in tech who would actually move the industry and get the recognition she deserved. Oh, and one more thing. When Shirley was only starting her career at the age of 18, she worked on the first transatlantic deep sea cable of the world. Keep that in mind, it will get relevant in just a few minutes. Let's move to 1980. The rise of the golden age of the Silicon Valley shifted the focus from hardware to software for men. Public figures like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were chanted as the heroes of modern computing and got most of the credit for creating the foundation of today's computers. And the public perception has shifted again. Men are software engineers now, so we have to take this profession and accredit it to the male role and teach the world that they are the stereotypes of that field so that no one could possibly mistakenly attribute the accomplishments of it to women. The stereotypical male nerd was injected into pop culture with movies like War Games, Weird Science and Revenge of the Nerds, and still kept this path to our modern days.
No need to neuter the nerd, I can get you back online.
Commercial scenes depicted fathers teaching not their daughters, but their sons how to use a computer. Video games were designed and framed to be for the boys. The women found themselves in the position of training their replacements. Despite these difficulties in the field, there was one mastermind that would make, once again, a historical contribution to the computing we know today. Radia Perlman was born in 1951 in a small town in Virginia. In her early years, she was a curious little child with immense talent in mathematics. However, her curiosity led her into a field that was just in the middle of defining itself: computer science. She graduated her bachelor's and short time later got her PhD in that field. Fast forward to the 1980s. Radia's inventions contributed to the internet as we know it today. Before we get to that, a quick lesson how the internet that we have today works. Your devices connect to a router, the mobile network that's coming from antennas and satellites, etc. We will call these nodes. Each node is connected to some kind of cable or wires that connects it to other nodes. Eventually, these will go to supernodes. These supernodes connect to other supernodes that can be on the other end of the ocean or even on the other side of the world, which is actually physically connected to our supernode with satellite signals or huge cables that are placed under the sea. You remember Shirley's early work? Through these supernodes, the physical connections to other nodes and finally to the node that runs the server in its local network to get your information can be accessed. These local networks are called Ethernet. The Ethernet was invented in 1937 as a means for computer workstations in a local area network and allow them to talk to each other using physical addresses. Now the issue was when you have such a local network with hundreds of machines. The complexity of the communication between these could increase massively with loops and other ways around to the path of your desired destination. Now the internet as we know it today consists of uncountable many machines. Just to give you a hint how many these are at least, around 1998 the number of unique addresses that could be provided with the IPv4 protocol would not be enough anymore to have unique addresses for all those machines in the internet, because it could only provide 4.3 billion unique addresses. If routing of hundreds of machines introduced such a disastrous scaling problem at that day, just imagine how it would look like in the internet that we have today. Radia Perlman created the spanning tree protocol to tackle the challenge of network loops, redundancy and resilience of humongous networks.
Get rid of it if there's temporary loops. Then along came the Ethernet. And so I was, designing DECnet, layer 3 for DECnet, which is kind of the same thing as IP.
Without this protocol, our modern internet would never have existed and would not be able to be spanned over the whole world in infinitely scalable manner. But she didn't stop there. Radia was key to a plethora of contributions to the internet, including but not limited to the ISIS protocol for a scalable internet, multiple contributions to security protocols, to secure and robust networking, resilient overlaid networks or RONs that built a layer of resilience for the internet and is still used today for mission critical systems in finance, healthcare and communication. While not getting the acknowledgement at that time, she's celebrated today as the mother of the internet and was honored by the National Academy of Engineering, Internet Hall of Fame and introduced to the National Inventor Hall of Fame in 2016.
The greater goal, and somehow it just all fits together.
Even with all these obstacles, the percentage of women majoring in computer science grew to 37% in 1984, which is twice of today's share. But it got worse and worse from that point. The gatekeeping of the tech scene resulted in a drastic decline of women representing the computer science industry. And this is just a logical consequence from being rejected from job offers because you wouldn't fit into the culture. That means nerds cannot talk to women. Being underrepresented in universities and lack the ability to build valuable connections with other student groups, and finally making the rational decision that it would be better for their own career to go down a path that is better catered for the personal demographic. But that was back in the days. We have learned from this, right? Nowadays we don't discredit women for their accomplishments. Right? Remember the pop culture propaganda from earlier? Now look at the highly popular and defining documentary Jobs from 2013. Joanna Hoffman, the product manager of Macintosh, and Susan Kerr, the designer of all graphics and icons you have probably seen in your whole life, were key players to the success of today's beloved products. But have you seen them in the Jobs movie? Of course not. How would you? They weren't reflected in that at all. So we've seen that women have never just played a secondary role in the history of technology, software and everything that makes up our world right now. But nowadays not too many things are invented anymore. Pioneering of technology have shifted from inventors to leaders. So let's cover how women have come to power and influence in modern day's tech industry. And yet viewers of this video have found it by searching for Dario Amodei instead of Daniela Amodei. Stay tuned.